Hello, Pisces, beautiful souls. I'm really grateful you're here today. Before we begin, just take a slow breath with me. Let yourself settle into this moment and simply listen with an open heart. If something resonates, hold it close. If it doesn't, that's perfectly okay. Every reading has its own path, and today feels like one that's wrapped in quiet emotion. The first card resting in front of me is the Moon, and yeah, I have to admit, this energy feels incredibly familiar. It feels like someone has been trying so hard to move forward, telling themselves they should let go, convincing themselves that enough time has passed. But every time they think they're finally creating distance, something gently pulls them back toward you. Maybe it's a song they didn't expect to hear while driving home. Maybe it's a dream that leaves them staring at the ceiling long after they wake up. Maybe it's simply your name appearing somewhere completely unexpected. Whatever it is, your energy seems to find them without asking for permission. And the more they try to explain it away with logic, the less logical it begins to feel. What's interesting is that this doesn't come across as obsession. It feels quieter than that, softer, almost like someone carrying a photograph inside their heart that they never truly put away. Life continues around them. They smile when they're supposed to smile. They go to work. They answer messages. They keep conversations light. But underneath all of that, there is still you. Then, Six of Cups quietly joins the reading, and oh my God, the atmosphere shifts immediately. Suddenly, it feels as though they're not just remembering moments, they're remembering feelings. The warmth they felt when you laughed without trying, the calm they found simply sitting beside you, the strange comfort of being understood without having to explain every piece of themselves. There are memories they thought had disappeared, yet somehow they're becoming clearer instead of fading. It's almost as if time isn't creating distance, it's polishing those memories until they shine even brighter. Pisces, if you've been wondering whether someone has completely forgotten what existed between you, this spread doesn't really feel that way. It feels more like someone discovering that certain connections refuse to become ordinary memories. Some people leave footprints in the mind. Others leave them in the heart. You seem to have done both. As I continue laying the cards down, judgment appears, and the energy becomes deeply reflective. This person seems to be standing in front of their own choices more honestly than they ever have before. They're replaying conversations, small moments, the things they wish they had said differently, the times they stayed silent, because pride felt easier than vulnerability. It's almost like they're beginning to understand that life didn't simply move them away from you. Some of those steps, they chose themselves. And that's not an easy realization. Yeah, sometimes the hardest conversations happen entirely inside our own minds. The more they sit with these thoughts, the more they recognize that you weren't asking for perfection, you were asking for honesty, presence, consistency, things that suddenly seem much more valuable than they once believed. Then, almost unexpectedly, Page of Cups arrives with such gentle energy that everything softens again. This doesn't feel loud, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like a heart that is carefully beginning to open after keeping its windows closed for far too long. There may be words they haven't found yet, feelings they're still learning how to name. Even so, something inside them seems to be shifting little by little. Curiosity is replacing avoidance. Hope is quietly replacing fear. And somewhere beneath all the uncertainty, an unspoken decision is slowly taking shape. Not because anyone forced it, not because circumstances demanded it, simply because pretending their heart feels nothing has become more exhausting than listening to what it has been whispering all along. And as these cards continue resting together, it feels like the silence surrounding this connection isn't quite as empty as it once seemed. Something beneath the surface has already begun moving, almost invisibly, carrying both of your stories toward a place neither of you could fully see before. There is something beautifully quiet about the energy that's unfolding here. It doesn't feel rushed. It feels like someone is slowly discovering that what they experienced with you refuses to fit inside any explanation they've used before. The star is resting at the center of this spread, and the feeling surrounding it is almost peaceful. It's as though your presence became a place where this person could finally lower their guard without realizing they were doing it. Some people come into our lives because they're exciting, some because they teach us lessons, but every once in a while, someone arrives and simply makes life feel softer. That's the feeling surrounding you. This person may not have understood it at first. In fact, they may have questioned it. They may have wondered why your conversation stayed in their mind longer than anyone else's, or why being around you somehow quieted the noise they carried every day. Yeah, that kind of peace can feel unfamiliar when someone has spent most of their life preparing for disappointment. It's almost like they expected every connection to ask something from them, to prove themselves, to perform, to protect parts of who they were. Yet with you, there seemed to be this gentle invitation to simply exist. No masks, no games, just being. Oh my God, that's much rarer than people realize. As I continue looking through the cards, the Lovers quietly appears, and this energy feels much deeper than attraction alone. It feels like two lives crossing paths for reasons neither person could fully understand in the moment. Sometimes people arrive exactly when our hearts are ready to wake up, even if our minds haven't caught up yet. This person keeps returning to the same thought, although they may not even say it out loud. What if meeting you wasn't an accident? What if all those strange coincidences weren't coincidences at all? What if every delayed conversation, every unexpected encounter, every moment that almost didn't happen somehow led them exactly where they were supposed to be? Those questions seem to linger inside them longer than they expected. They've started looking at your connection differently. Instead of asking whether the feelings were too intense, they're beginning to wonder whether they were simply real. That's a very different question. Ace of Cups enters the reading so gently that it almost feels like watching the first light appear before sunrise. There is something inside this person that no longer wants to keep every emotion locked away. They may still be careful, they may still pause before speaking, but the walls that once felt impossible to move don't seem quite as permanent anymore. You know, sometimes people mistake emotional safety for boredom, because they've become so accustomed to chaos. Healthy love can feel unfamiliar when uncertainty has always been normal. This person seems to be recognizing that perhaps what they felt with you wasn't missing excitement. Maybe it was offering something much more valuable. A chance to breathe, a chance to trust, a chance to love without constantly preparing for loss. That realization alone changes the way they see everything that happened between you. The final card here is the High Priestess. And honestly, Pisces, this feels incredibly fitting for your energy. There are moments when words simply aren't necessary because something much quieter speaks louder. It almost feels like this person has started listening to the part of themselves they've ignored for a very long time. Not the voice shaped by fear, not the one built from old disappointments. Something deeper than that. There are days when they suddenly think of you for no obvious reason. Moments when your energy seems to drift into an ordinary afternoon without invitation. They may catch themselves smiling before realizing why. Other times, they simply stop whatever they're doing because your presence feels strangely close, even across distance. Whether those moments are memory, intuition, or something neither of you can fully explain doesn't seem to matter anymore. What matters is that they're no longer trying to dismiss them. Instead, they're allowing those quiet feelings to exist. They're allowing themselves to wonder. And perhaps, for the first time in a very long while, they're allowing hope to sit beside their heart without immediately asking it to leave. There is a quieter layer beneath all of this that almost whispers instead of speaks. The cards are beginning to reveal a place this person rarely allows anyone to see. Eight of Swords arrives first. And what I notice isn't someone trapped by another person. It feels much more personal than that. It feels like someone standing inside a room they unknowingly built themselves, where every wall is made from old disappointments, unanswered questions, and stories they've repeated for years. Maybe they've been telling themselves that love always comes with loss. Maybe they learned somewhere along the way that opening their heart only gives someone the power to leave. Those beliefs have followed them for so long that they almost feel like truth, even if part of them has quietly wished they weren't. You know, fear has a strange way of disguising itself. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it looks like silence. Other times it looks like someone saying they're perfectly fine on their own, even while wishing someone would gently knock on the door they've locked from the inside. This person may have convinced themselves that creating distance was the safest choice, not because they didn't care, but because caring felt far more dangerous than pretending not to. Yeah, that's a heavy burden to carry. As the hermit settles beside the first card, everything becomes incredibly reflective. It feels like life has been giving them more quiet moments than usual. Long drives without turning on the radio, sitting in the car for a few extra minutes before going inside, waking up earlier than they need to, and simply staring out the window while the world slowly begins another day. Those little moments matter. They're the moments when distractions disappear and a person can no longer outrun their own heart. This person seems to be asking themselves questions they once avoided. Why did I pull away from someone who only wanted to understand me? Why did I keep searching for flaws instead of appreciating what was already in front of me? Why was it easier to assume the worst than to believe something beautiful could actually stay? Oh my God. Sometimes the answers aren't comfortable. Sometimes healing begins the moment someone becomes honest enough to admit that fear has been making decisions their heart never agreed with. The energy shifts beautifully as King of Cups appears. I really like seeing this card here because it doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It feels mature, steady, like emotions that have stopped fighting against themselves. This person may still struggle to express everything they're feeling, but something inside them is changing. They're beginning to understand that love isn't measured by how well it's hidden. They're realizing that protecting themselves so completely also prevented them from receiving the very connection they longed for. There is a softness growing inside them that wasn't there before. Instead of trying to analyze every emotion, they're allowing themselves to actually experience it. Instead of pushing feelings aside until another day, they're sitting with them, listening to them. That takes courage. More courage than pretending nothing matters. The final card. Strength doesn't feel like forcing anything to happen. Quite the opposite, actually. It feels like someone learning that real strength isn't found in building higher walls. It's found in having the courage to lower them, even if only one brick at a time. This person seems to be discovering that vulnerability isn't weakness. Trust isn't foolish. Loving someone deeply doesn't automatically mean losing yourself. For someone who has spent so much of their life controlling every outcome, that's an enormous shift. It may happen slowly, it may happen quietly, but every small step away from fear becomes a step closer to the kind of connection they've secretly hoped was possible all along. And as these cards continue to rest together, it almost feels as though the path ahead is no longer asking them whether they're brave enough to hide what they feel, but whether they're finally ready to let someone see the heart they've been protecting for so very long. Something feels noticeably calmer here, almost as if the emotional storm has begun to settle, leaving enough silence for honesty to finally find its way into the room. Temperance is the first card that catches my attention, and what I feel isn't someone trying to erase the past. It feels more like someone learning how to hold it differently. There are moments in life when we realize saying, "I'm sorry," isn't the hardest part. Living differently afterward is. This person seems to be arriving at that understanding. They've been looking back at the connection from a completely different perspective. Instead of asking what they were missing, they're beginning to see what you quietly carried all along: your patience, your willingness to listen, the way you stayed gentle even when you probably had every reason not to be. Those things may have seemed ordinary at the time, but from where they're standing today, they feel extraordinary. Yeah, kindness often isn't fully appreciated until it's no longer within reach. There is a quiet ache surrounding this realization. Not because they're drowning in guilt, but because they're beginning to understand how deeply your heart tried to meet theirs, while they were still learning how to meet their own. As justice settles into the reading, the energy becomes remarkably sincere. This doesn't feel like someone trying to rewrite history or explain away their choices. It feels like someone accepting responsibility without immediately searching for excuses. That's a very different energy. Sometimes people apologize because they want relief from guilt. Other times they change because they finally understand the impact of their actions. This feels much closer to the second. Oh my God! There are memories surfacing that they can't ignore anymore. Conversations where they could have chosen tenderness instead of distance. Moments when your silence wasn't indifference but disappointment. Times when you weren't asking them to become someone else. You were simply hoping they would let you love the person they already were. They're beginning to see that clearly. For someone who once believed protecting themselves meant keeping emotional distance, this awareness carries a quiet kind of heartbreak. Not because they lost every opportunity, because they're realizing how many beautiful ones they almost walked away from. The energy shifts once Eight of Pentacles appears. I really like this card here because it doesn't speak through grand promises. It speaks through consistency. This person seems to understand that trust isn't rebuilt in one conversation. It isn't restored by dramatic declarations. It's created through small choices repeated over time. Showing up, listening carefully, following through, being present on ordinary days, not only emotional ones. That's where their heart appears to be moving. They're asking themselves difficult questions. If another chance ever appeared, would I know how to love differently? Could I become someone whose actions create safety instead of uncertainty? Would I have the patience to rebuild something that I once expected to fix itself? Those questions don't have immediate answers, but they're asking them anyway. Sometimes that's where healing truly begins. Not with certainty, with willingness. Finally, Knight of Cups enters the reading, carrying such gentle energy that everything softens once again. There is something quietly hopeful about this card. It feels like someone who no longer wants their feelings to remain hidden behind hesitation. Perhaps they're imagining conversations that haven't happened yet, wondering how your voice would sound after so much time, thinking about what they would say if they were standing in front of you without fear making every decision for them. Maybe the words won't come out perfectly. Maybe they'll pause. Maybe they'll smile nervously before finding the courage to speak. But perfection doesn't seem to matter as much anymore. Authenticity does. Because somewhere inside them, they're beginning to understand that genuine love isn't proven by saying the right things once. It's revealed by becoming someone whose heart and actions finally move in the same direction. And as these cards continue unfolding together, it almost feels as though the quiet work happening within them is slowly preparing the ground for a different kind of meeting, one where neither of you has to carry the weight of yesterday in quite the same way anymore. A quiet realization seems to be changing the entire direction of this reading. It doesn't arrive with dramatic words or sudden confessions. It feels much more subtle than that. Almost like someone waking up one ordinary morning and recognizing that life has continued moving forward, but you have too. Five of Swords reversed is resting here, and the energy feels very different from what it might have once represented. This person doesn't seem interested in winning anymore. They're beginning to understand that love was never meant to become a competition between pride and vulnerability. There may have been moments when silence became a weapon. Moments when they believed pulling away would somehow protect them or give them control. Perhaps they thought you would always remain exactly where they left you, patiently waiting until they decided it was safe to come closer again. Yeah, life rarely works that way. One of the hardest lessons anyone can learn is realizing that the people we love continue growing, even while we're standing still. This person seems to be seeing that clearly now. They're noticing little things they may have overlooked before. Perhaps you've become calmer, more confident, more comfortable in your own energy. Maybe you're smiling more often. Maybe you've stopped chasing answers that never came. Whatever has shifted, it feels like you've started carrying yourself with a quiet confidence that doesn't ask for anyone's approval. Oh my God, that kind of transformation can be impossible to ignore. It's almost as though they suddenly realize you were never standing still. You were healing. You were becoming. And somewhere along that journey, your light began shining even brighter. The Emperor appears beside these emotions, and I have to say, This doesn't feel like control in the old sense. It feels like someone recognizing that responsibility belongs to them. They can no longer blame timing, circumstances, misunderstandings, or fear for every choice that was made. There's a maturity beginning to emerge. This person seems to understand that if they truly want a place in your future, they can't continue behaving like the version of themselves who created distance in the first place. That version no longer feels sustainable. They may even be asking themselves difficult questions. If someone else notices everything I failed to appreciate, what happens then? What if another person recognizes the kindness I took for granted? What if someone else becomes the safe place they never allowed themselves to become? Those thoughts seem to linger much longer than they expected, not because they're jealous alone, because they're realizing what genuine value looks like after nearly losing sight of it. Queen of Cups brings such beautiful energy into this reading. Pisces, this card feels incredibly connected to your presence. Whether this represents your energy or simply the way they experience you, there is something deeply comforting here. You may not even realize how much you've changed. Your compassion no longer comes at the expense of your peace. Your heart remains open, but your boundaries have quietly become stronger. You still care deeply, yet you've stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to you. That balance is beautiful, and strangely enough, it seems to inspire this person more than anything else. They aren't only missing your love, they're beginning to admire the person you've become. Someone who chooses peace without becoming cold. Someone who forgives without forgetting their own worth. Someone who continues loving life, even after disappointment. Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. Finally, Seven of Pentacles reversed settles into the reading, and there's an unmistakable feeling that hesitation has started losing its grip. Waiting no longer feels comfortable for this person. Delaying conversations, delaying choices, delaying vulnerability, none of it seems to bring the relief they once imagined it would. Instead, every day that passes seems to raise another quiet question inside them. How much longer am I willing to watch life move forward without saying what my heart has been carrying? They're beginning to understand that opportunities aren't only lost through rejection. Sometimes they're lost through endless postponement. For someone who once believed there would always be another chance, time itself has become an unexpected teacher. It almost feels like they're standing at the edge of a decision where fear no longer seems as convincing as it once did, and the possibility of reaching towards something real is beginning to outweigh every reason they once found to stay exactly where they were. There is a gentle sense of certainty flowing through these final cards, and honestly, it feels different from everything we've explored so far. This isn't the energy of someone trying to figure out what they feel anymore. It feels like someone who has finally stopped arguing with their own heart. Eight of Wands arrives with such clear movement that it almost feels as though everything that has been standing still inside this connection is beginning to breathe again. For a long time, this person seemed to believe there would always be another tomorrow, another opportunity, another moment to say what they truly meant. But something has shifted. They're beginning to understand that meaningful connections aren't meant to live forever inside unfinished conversations. There are words they've carried quietly for far too long. Some are simple, some are difficult. Others have been waiting behind fear for so long that they almost forgot those words deserve to be spoken at all. Yeah, sometimes the bravest sentence isn't the most poetic one. Sometimes it's simply, I should have told you sooner. Or, I never really stopped caring. Or, even, I was afraid. Those small truths often carry far more weight than perfect speeches. The energy feels as though this person no longer wants silence to speak on their behalf. They're beginning to realize that assumptions create distance, while honest conversations create possibilities. Whether those conversations happen immediately or unfold naturally over time, something inside them seems ready to stop hiding behind uncertainty. As Ten of Cups gently settles into the reading, the atmosphere becomes incredibly warm. Oh my God, this doesn't feel like someone chasing a fantasy anymore. It feels like someone imagining an ordinary life and suddenly realizing how beautiful ordinary can actually be. They're not only thinking about exciting beginnings, they're wondering what peaceful mornings might feel like. sharing quiet dinners after long days, laughing over things that no one else would understand, supporting each other through difficult seasons instead of facing them alone, growing older without constantly wondering whether love will disappear tomorrow. It's almost as if their definition of happiness has quietly changed. Instead of searching for intensity, they're beginning to long for stability. Instead of excitement that burns quickly, they're drawn towards something that lasts, that feels incredibly meaningful. The world appears, and with it comes a feeling of completion rather than ending. Life has a remarkable way of bringing us back to lessons we once avoided until we're finally ready to understand them. This person seems to recognize that every chapter they've lived through has brought them here. The misunderstandings, the distance, the missed opportunities, even the silence. None of those experiences seem meaningless anymore. Instead, they've become part of a journey that has slowly reshaped the way this person understands love, commitment, and themselves. Pisces, one thing that feels especially beautiful here is that they no longer seem interested in returning to who they used to be. They're looking toward who they're becoming. That's a completely different direction. They're not hoping to repeat old patterns with better intentions. They're hoping to create something entirely new, something built with honesty instead of fear, something protected by trust instead of uncertainty. Finally, the Emperor closes the reading with remarkably grounded energy. Earlier in their journey, strength may have looked like emotional distance or keeping everything under control. But what I feel now is much quieter. Real strength seems to be taking responsibility, keeping promises, showing consistency, creating safety instead of confusion. This person appears to understand that love isn't proven in one unforgettable moment. It's proven in hundreds of ordinary moments where someone continues choosing the connection day after day. Yeah, that realization changes everything. Perhaps there will still be conversations that feel awkward. Perhaps there will still be moments when old fears quietly resurface. Healing rarely follows a perfectly straight line. Even so, this energy carries the feeling of someone who has finally chosen a direction instead of endlessly standing at the crossroads. And sometimes, that's where an entirely different story begins. Pisces, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly hope these messages brought you a little clarity, a little comfort, or perhaps simply reminded you to trust your own intuition above all else. You are deeply appreciated, and I genuinely look forward to sharing another reading with you very soon. Until then, take gentle care of your beautiful heart. Bye for now.